taking on a fictional business identity and assigning a fictional business identity to the judges as well. Please make sure everyone knows who you are and who the judges are before you begin. You'll have 25 minutes to describe the legal, financial, and ethical dimensions of the problem and to recommend a solution that passes muster on all three counts. During this time, the teams will not be interrupted. When you're finished, the judges will ask you questions for about 10 or 15 minutes. During the Q&A, both you and the judges will stay in your character, in your roles. It's very Hollywood. Then after that, we'll take a pause, take a deep breath, and we'll have a chance to give you feedback and to answer any questions you may have. So before we start the clock, I guess I'm the senior judge at this presentation. So let me begin by introducing myself. My name is Barney Rosenberg. I'm trying my best to retire. Began my career as a trial lawyer, defending companies, and then got persuaded to go to work for some of them. And I spent the last 15 years as the global vice president for ethics and business conduct for a British company in the aerospace business. They were kind enough to let me live in Los Angeles. So let's get some introductions from the judges. Jason, should we start with you?
Happy to do so. Glad to be here. This is my, I think, 4th year as a judge with Jeff and his team. I always enjoy this process. I am a proud LMU graduate myself. I graduated in 2015 with my MBA from the university, and shortly thereafter opened my own marketing and consulting firm. This topic, especially when I was able to select Tesla, I was like, oh, I'm really interested in this presentation today. Glad to be here.
Monica?
Well, certainly, Jason, I welcome you and everyone else out to New Mexico. And yes, you see a lot of Teslas out here, so I'm very much looking forward to the consulting group's presentation. I'm Monica Garcia Swabenbauer. I graduated from the School of Business at Loyola in 1991. I am a practicing litigation attorney here in New Mexico. I'm a partner and officer here at the law firm and do primarily civil defense in a whole host of arenas. And I very much look forward to your group's presentation. Thank you for allowing me to be a judge in this process.
So we are ready. Anytime the team is ready, I'm going to start the timer and you have 25 minutes.
Okay. So before we begin, I just want to, address the roles of the judges in this presentation. The judges will be playing the role of the Tesla board of directors, and we are an outside consulting firm. So to get started, I want to go ahead and thank you all very much for being here today. We appreciate you all giving us this opportunity to address such challenges for Tesla. As an introduction, my name is Devin Reyes, and I'm the CEO of Amet Consulting.
My name is Aiden Flint, and I'm the CFO of Amet Consulting.
My name is Gabriella Pergament, and I'm the Chief Legal Officer of Amet Consulting.
My name is Jamie Getty, and I'm the Chief Ethics Officer of Amet Consulting.
And I'm Daniel Menendez. I'm the Chief Operations Officer for Amet Consulting.
Yes, so go ahead. I'm going to go ahead and introduce who Amet Consulting is. Just so a little bit of background, Amet actually stems from the Latin root word environment, so meaning environmental consulting. And we are leaders in the sustainable consulting industry. We have ethical and sustainable backgrounds with highly experienced teams. And our recommendations for you today are going to align with Tesla's corporate values, and we'll be sure to address the environmental, financial, and both the ethical and legal implications of those. Now, before I move forward, I want to emphasize to you that we are your trusted advisor and a mentor. So if you have any questions along the way, any confusions, please don't hesitate to stop us, and we'd be more than happy to clarify it at that moment. Now, to jump right into Tesla's current supply chain, as you all know, as the board of directors, Tesla currently has a pretty sophisticated way of sourcing its lithium, nickel, and cobalt sources. Currently, these countries include Australia, Argentina, Brazil, and even the Democratic Republic of Congo, to name a few. Now, these resources are then transported over to Japan, as you know, to create those cathodes, those essential pieces to the electric vehicle, which are then shipped back over to North America. Now, all in all, as you know, this is a high transportation cost and contributes to high amount of gas emissions for Tesla. But interestingly, Mr. Musk in 2020 on the Battery Day, he made the announcement. He revealed your future plans to develop a cathode facility in North America. And the North American facility will also facilitate more production in the North American vehicle production. Doing so will reduce overall travel distance, cost, and emissions, as seen in Tesla's graphic here. Now, an astounding number of 80% of Tesla's cost and also Tesla's emissions are going to be reduced. So I want to go ahead and give kudos to the board and commend you for these efforts for leaning out your supply chain and really focusing on your sustainable purpose. However, as you know, the challenge is far from over. Nickel, cobalt, and lithium, the trajectory for demand is on the up and up with no end in sight. So we're far from finished. Demands of these materials are growing exponentially, calling for more mines and more infrastructure. Interestingly, in a quarter two earnings call, Mr. Musk called upon other companies to address Tesla's need for ethically mined nickel, stating if you mine nickel efficiently in an environmentally sensitive way, please get nickel. This was a cry for help, and it really identified a lot of Tesla's challenges today. The first, an ethical sourcing issue. There's an overwhelming amount of demand for battery material with an insufficient infrastructure to support that. And lastly, battery material that is toxic. It's destructive for the environment. Currently, recycling rates across the globe for lithium-ion batteries does not exceed more than 5%. And by 2030, an estimated 2 million metric tons of lithium-ion batteries will be generated every single year. Now, I want to introduce you to our approach. Meet Li-Cycle. Now, as you can see in the top right corner, you'll see a QR code. So feel free, if you'd like, to go ahead and take out your cell phone and scan the QR code, and it'll redirect you to the Li-Cycle site as I continue to discuss more. But Li-Cycle is an environmentally focused business that aims to create an industry that is most efficient based off their end of life cycle solution for battery materials. They have a patented technology that allows for up to 95% of materials to be recovered from its used batteries. Now, this is important because it creates an opportunity for Tesla to create a strategic approach. This strategic approach is going to allow Tesla to first develop industry knowledge with Li-Cycle, incorporate the technology into Tesla's operations, scale, and then push an international campaign abroad. So why is this important for Tesla? Why should Tesla do this? The approach is ideal because it presents an opportunity for Tesla to further its values of incorporating ethical, sustainable, and a profitable approach. And maybe even most importantly, Tesla's transition in 2003 from Tesla Motors to simply Tesla emphasized that Tesla is no longer a car manufacturer, but a clean energy company. And as you can see here, it's almost a perfect match. The 5-year Li-Cycle rollout plan involves North America, Europe, and China. And as you know, as the board, you already have existing facilities in North America. You have several in China, and you're also building the one in Berlin. So it seems to be a match made in heaven. And Li-Cycle stands at the intersection of 3 critical elements: the electric vehicle revolution, a need for battery materials that need to be supplied to meet that growing demand, and lastly, an ethical and sustainable solution to do so. Now, Aiden's going to go ahead and jump into the financial implications of this approach.
Thank you, Devin. I will now be speaking about some of the financial implications that will benefit Tesla if they decide to work with Li-Cycle. The first of these issues is Tesla's material costs. Currently, cobalt, lithium, nickel, and other materials used in electric vehicle batteries have reached their 52-week price highs. This has been caused by a surge in lithium and ion battery production by not only Tesla, but also GM and Ford, as both of those companies begin to roll out their electric vehicle fleets as well. Currently, the prices of these materials are $85,000 per ton of lithium, $3,000 per ton of carbon, $2,000 per ton of manganese, around $52,000 per ton of cobalt, and around $16,000 per ton of nickel. Now, as you'll see on the next slide, the issue with this is that in terms of production, for the world's battery demand in 2030, we will need to triple the amount of production that is currently being produced in these mines. Lithium and graphite will both need to triple from 500,000 tons to 1.5 million tons. Nickel will need to reach 1 million tons. Manganese will need to reach 500,000 tons, and cobalt will need to reach 360,000 tons produced. Now, currently, the world does not have enough natural deposits for some of these materials to even fulfill these requests. So not only will the supply be almost stagnant or be able to decrease as the natural resources are depleted, but the demand will only continue to grow. And as we know, this will lead to a massive increase in the cost as the demand rapidly outpaces the supply. The solution to this is to work with Li-Cycle with recycling. On the next slide, you will see Tesla's current partnership with batteries only recycles around 60% of Tesla's batteries. And of that 60% of batteries that are getting recycled, only around 10% of the materials are actually recovered and reused. The other 90% is sent to a landfill because it is too expensive for Tesla to recycle them on a large scale. However, Tesla has found that partnering with smaller, more environmentally conscious recyclers, they are able to recycle their battery packs profitably. The issue with this is that these smaller recyclers are not able to meet Tesla's demand for scale. Now, Li-Cycle is a perfect solution to this, because not only will Li-Cycle be able to handle Tesla's scale of batteries required for recycling, which will increase the amount they'll be able to recycle from 60% to a much greater capacity, but they are also able to recover 95% of battery components that are able to be reused in future batteries. This is a massive increase of almost 85% in terms of the amount of recovered material, which will drastically reduce Tesla's costs for their vehicles. Currently, the battery cost for Tesla is around $10,000 to $12,000 per car, and materials are around half of this cost. With Tesla saving money with recycling instead of purchasing new materials, they will be able to save a few $1,000s per car, which will also help in Tesla's goal of decreasing the cost of electric vehicles to make them more affordable and more available to more people. Another benefit of recycled goods is also that a study has shown that recycled materials have a less than 1% potential difference when compared to new materials used in batteries. This means that there will be no performance noticeable difference between recycled battery parts and new battery parts, which means that Tesla's reputation will not be tarnished by less effective batteries, because that will not be an issue. Now, I will also pass this on to Daniel to continue talking about the financials.
Thank you, Aidan. I will go a bit over the financial cost and the options we're proposing you take. So as external consultants, we know Tesla currently has more cash in hand than it has ever had. However, we're not truly aware of Tesla's financial plans, and as such, we're proposing three solutions that range from the most capital intensive to the least capital intensive. However, we do want to emphasize these solutions are in order of preference. Our first proposed solution is the acquisition. Currently, Li-Cycle is a public company. It's floated on the New York Stock Exchange under a special acquisition corporation. This means it's just a placeholder for the shares. However, in a couple of weeks, they will be floating as a company themselves. Today, market value, as of this time, a few minutes ago, market capitalization sets at $1.6 billion. That's $10.70 a share. So thus acquiring a controlling stake on Li-Cycle will run at about a cost of $800 to $950 million, depending on if it's a hostile or a non-hostile takeover. This option does guarantee us control over Li-Cycle capital expenditure, and most importantly, it gives us control over the patent process, which makes Li-Cycle as valuable as it is. On the other hand, we have our second and third options, which are considerably cheaper. They come about half the cost, and we're talking $300 to $400 million. This would allow Tesla to implement our solution if cash is a constraint. This option, of course, does not guarantee the long-term holding of the technology, but does guarantee we get to implement it near our gigafactories, and as such, we reduce our marginal cost to produce a vehicle by thousands of dollars, as mentioned by my partner Aidan before. Now, to tackle a bit of the ethics of our solution, I'll leave you with our ethical officer, Jamie.
Some of the ethical issues I will be talking about today involve human rights violations, child labor, environmental risk for locals, poisoning water sources, and eliminating farmers' access to water. The root of these problems are the mining used in order to gain the supplies for Tesla's electric batteries. The main sources that I will be talking about today are cobalt, nickel, and lithium mining. First, I will be talking about cobalt mining. About 70% of the world's cobalt mining comes from the Democratic Republic of Congo. In the DRC, there are many human rights violations, such as working 24-hour shifts and getting paid as little as $1 a day. Additionally, due to the lack of schooling and household income, a lot of times workers bring their children into work, and they work under the same conditions that their parents do. They work long hours with no breaks and very little compensation. Unfortunately, it is very hard to decide whether or not, or to distinguish whether or not a company is buying directly from these unethical mines or not. However, along with the partnership with Li-Cycle, Tesla should also look into not using cobalt anymore in their batteries. As seen in the new Tesla 3 models, their batteries don't use any cobalt whatsoever. And looking into manufacturing all of their cars using the same technology, Tesla could eliminate their need for cobalt altogether. Next, I'll be discussing nickel mining. So Tesla mines their nickels from Russia, Brazil, Australia, Indonesia, and the Philippines. But regardless of where these mines are, they all face very similar environmental risks. For starters, nickel mines release sulfur dioxide, which produces a cancerous dust. Some of the health effects, according to the American Lung Association, include shortness of breath, wheezing, chest tightness, reduced lung ability, and sometimes hospitalization. Additionally, with these unsafe work environments, there have been association between workers and deformities and respiration issues. However, the issues of nickel mining go beyond just that of human effects, and there are also large environmental repercussions due to mining. In 2016, a river in Russia turned red near a very large nickel mining town. This happened from a leak in a nearby pipe and led to the river becoming heavily polluted. Additionally, many companies are barely able to keep up with the mining production that they're being required to now, and they're forced into taking shortcuts and ignoring expensive waste cleanup along the way. So in addition to Tesla partnering with Li-Cycle, we should also make sure that the nickel is being mined from an ethically sourced place with environmentally friendly procedures. Lastly, I'll be talking about lithium mining in Argentina and Australia. So first, I'll be discussing some of the human rights issues, which are very similar to nickel mining. There's a large amount of respiratory issues throughout hospitals and diseases around these mines that are found particularly within miners. And to talk about the environmental side too, currently the way that we mine lithium is through salt brines and other naturally dry areas of the world. And in addition to using very dry areas of the world, lithium mining requires a very large amount of fresh water. And therefore, there's a large amount of fresh water being wasted in areas which don't really have an excess amount of fresh water, which can lead to negative impacts such as farmers not being able to farm any longer because they don't have any access to water. All the water has gone away. So a solution that Tesla came up with recently was buying land in Nevada, which would have used a different type of mining and not salt brines, which would have been a little bit more effective. However, this plan recently fell through, and we would recommend going and finding another plan like that and try to finish through with that plan. So with those ethical dilemmas in mind, I'll be passing it off to Gabriella, who will be presenting on the legal impacts of Tesla.
Thank you, Jamie. So now let's dive into some legal issues and regulations that we may face if we don't implement a solution soon. So the first thing that is definitely worth acknowledging is heightened battery regulations that are coming about in California, China, and most prominently, the European Union. This next timeline shows the steps the EU is taking to propose for new battery regulations. As we can see, by year 2035, there will be certain thresholds that will need to be met in order for lithium batteries to be used. This is extremely essential because as more countries go for this, meaning countries and companies perhaps making electric cars to meet certain thresholds, the harder it will be for Tesla to maintain their place in the market as a niche product. The goal of these regulations is to promote a more efficient use of resources by raising the collection and recycling rates of portable batteries with a focus on the recovery of cobalt, lithium, nickel, and lead from all of these recycled batteries. Manufacturers will also have to provide information on the amount of recycled content, and the process will follow a harmonized methodology, which the details of which are yet to be communicated, but is definitely something to be recognized as we move towards a more regulated future in the world of battery usage and production. So now let's move on to some potential legal issues we may face. Precedent of the Supreme Court indicated that alien tort statute lawsuits had no basis to proceed in US territory as demonstrated in the Kiobel versus v. Royal Dutch in the past. However, the court has recently granted cert to an ongoing ATS case, John Doe versus Nestle. This case ties Nestle USA and Cargill to forced child labor in the Ivory Coast for harvesting cocoa. Since the alien tort statute can be interpreted by each circuit individually, the 9th and 4th Circuits supported investigating whether or not Nestle was liable. This is an ongoing case, and oral arguments were heard by the Supreme Court on December 1st of 2020. This sets a precedent for the Ninth Circuit, California, which Tesla holds a huge market in and can apply to customers overseas as well. This is crucial because with our solution, we won't need to import raw materials as much and less labor will be required. Next, the international rights advocates via Apple, Microsoft, Dell, and Tesla. The international rights advocate groups has filed a class complaint for injunctive relief and damages class action lawsuit against Apple, Microsoft, Dell, and your company Tesla. This case is also currently in motion. The counsel for the plaintiff is representing 14 Congolese parents and children seeking relief and damages for these companies aiding and abetting the use of young children in the Democratic Republic of Congo cobalt mining scene. The plaintiff also pursues relief on the common law basis of negligent supervision, enrichment, and intentional infliction of emotional distress. Not only is this an ethical issue, but now it's made legal, and this could be a huge PR issue for Tesla if the pattern is ongoing. As a leading company in the world, Tesla needs to set the standard of what an ethical company represents. We can't find itself sitting in lawsuits relating to these issues, which definitely misaligned with your core corporate values and what message is being brought to your customers to accelerate the advent of sustainable transport.
Of course, our legal solution does come with some obstacles. Most of these are being the antitrust regulations existing in the US. However, the Sherman Antitrust Act of 1890, the Clayton Antitrust Act of 1914, and the Hart-Scott-Rodino Antitrust Improvement Acts of 1979 are more concerned with monopolization of the markets and its consequences, such as price fixing, price gouging, and collusion, than it is concerned with the vertical integration. What I mean by vertical integration is that Tesla and Li-Cycle have very different markets. Tesla is mostly a vehicle corporation while also selling solar panels and other sort of renewable energy sources, while Li-Cycle is just a battery recycler. So there is really no expectation of scrutiny on this sort of deal because the parties involved do not share a market and they cannot collude in any way. And as such, as precedent sets in US regulations and other cases in the past, there's usually no obstacles, no hurdles to overcome to this sort of partnership, more than the legally required time that the SEC and other authorities take to validate the transaction and such. A very recent example of this was T-Mobile Sprint merger, which took a long time because they were a horizontal merger. So we're looking at half the time or even a third of the time, much less than 3 or 4 months to complete this. Now into our solution. Our solution proposed a partnership and also a joint venture. As I said before, what I mentioned earlier was regarding the acquisition, and now the legal obstacles for the partnership and joint venture. In general, the difference are mostly legal here. It's about the fiduciary duty between the partners and the fiduciary duties on a joint venture that differs this sort of approach. Usually on a partnership, the duties are higher. You have a duty of loyalty, of care, and of good faith to the partners, and the liability it's bigger. On the other hand, on the joint venture, they're very similar, but they are limited to what the to what the project contained on the joint venture is. While on the other hand, it's more broad, it's contained over the whole business. So there's a lot less ethical, legal implications on a joint venture than there is on a partnership. So that is something to be taken into account regarding all what my partner and legal executive officer Gavi said before. The probability of a suit to Tesla is higher on a partnership than it is on a joint venture. And now to conclude, I'll go back to my Chief Executive Officer, Devin.
Thank you, Daniel. So lastly, I want to just quickly wrap up our presentation with overviewing of the United Nations Sustainability Development Goals. Interestingly, with just one approach, an ethical answer to a sustainability issue that creates financial opportunities for institutions both domestic and abroad is present. As you know, the international push of Tesla to come off as a corporate ethical and sustainable business is three intersections that we want to bring together with this opportunity to expand with Lifecycle. So this brings me into why a partnership with Tesla is so ideal. The co-founder, Tim Johnson of Lifecycle, stated that the cost for Lifecycle to produce any one of those battery metals from recycling is cheaper than mining any of those materials around the world. Our approach aims to integrate a sustainable closed-loop battery program that creates savings and introduces a cheaper source for battery materials. A patented approach of 95% battery material allows for a new, innovative perspective on how to approach this toxic waste problem. And lastly, we want to combat these unethical sourcing issues related to the essential battery materials abroad. Now, I want to go ahead and thank you all very much for giving us your time to listen to this, and I want to allow you to have time to answer any lingering, to ask any lingering questions. So please, the floor is yours.
Well, thank you very much, folks, for your thoughtful presentation, but I'm a little confused. I thought we were talking about unsafe mining activities, but now I think we're talking about just recycling from old cars. Which is it?
I guess I can start off answering that question, and I'm sure some of my colleagues can pick up from there. So yes, the first, one of the main three issues that we want to address is the ethical issues related to mining. Tesla currently is sourcing from the Democratic Republic of Congo, for example, to source its cobalt. It's also sourcing from other other mines internationally, where they don't have control as to the ethical compliance around those mines. So yes, the first problem is, how are we going to address this mining issue of all these resources abroad? Now, by integrating this recycling technology, we're going to create a new source for battery materials and reduce that dependence on these mines abroad, specifically ones like the Congo and ones in China. So overall, our approach is creating a sustainable solution while also integrating an ethical approach to the problem.
Yeah, like I mentioned before, the use of now recycling these materials will allow us to not need to get these raw materials from other countries, like Devin was saying. So in essence, we're kind of solving both, because now we don't need the labor and we don't need the materials. So with this recycled solution, we can tackle two problems in one.
So we're going to put a whole bunch of poor people in developing countries out of work.
So actually, we don't want to present them in that light, because these poor people are in unethical mining situations. Now, the opportunity for Tesla to create this new source may also allow them to create more industry abroad, more recycling opportunities, maybe even environmental rejuvenation. You know, they can contribute to campaigns abroad, so they can expand that corporate value of theirs as becoming a sustainable and ethical corporation.
And if I can expand on that, and I would like to apologize. I had some technical difficulties, but if I can expand upon that, while it may seem like just the issues with the DRC may put people out of work, there's also a lot of other ethical issues involving putting people out of work in other ways, such as a lot of the mining sources are putting like farmers out of work, and they're making people relocate because of pollution. So you'd actually be helping a lot of people who are already struggling due to these larger companies taking over.
Jason?
I have a question. You presented some very compelling data points here to the board across the legal, financial, ethical ramifications of a potential partnership or acquisition or joint venture with Lifecycle. I like to play devil's advocate on the board here. What if we didn't do anything? What do you think is the greatest risk to Tesla if we weren't to move forward?
I can speak to that a little bit for the financial aspect. Currently, as I mentioned, the demand for these materials are rising as other companies are continuing to grow their electric vehicle fleets as well. And so one of Tesla's main goals that they've been trying to really reach is a more affordable electric vehicle. And that's been part of their mission statement, is to bring down their costs of their lowest electric vehicle. And if we do not go with this plan at all, and we don't worry about the recycling and continue at the rate we are, it's out of our control what the prices of the materials become as the supply is, stagnant and the demand increases. So Tesla's cost of goods sold will rise exponentially as the prices rise, because they aren't able to control, how much they're paying for that, because it's being set by other parties. And so at least in terms of the financial aspect, if we don't do anything, it'll severely affect Tesla's bottom line in the future, unless massive research and development processes are taken to create a completely new battery that doesn't require any of these materials. However, in regards to that aspect as well, Tesla is, as we mentioned, moving away from cobalt in some of their batteries, but still a majority of these materials are still necessary in those batteries without cobalt. So regardless, we'll always have a reliance on one or more of these materials. And since we do not control the price if we're buying from other parties, then this will continue to affect Tesla's financials into the future.
Okay.
Monica?
With respect to an international reach or impact, Tesla obviously has an interest in continuing its worldwide footprint. And if it partnered with Li-Cycle, how would that footprint expand into the international arena? In other words, would there be recycling facilities outside of the United States? And how extensive would it be on the legal side of things to work that through with the various regulations that may apply?
Yeah, so as far as the international expansion is concerned, as I don't know if you recall, but in the graphic itself, it explained how, Li-Cycle's 5-year rollout plan pretty much aligned with the international plan that Tesla currently has. And this actually, an interesting statistic, but by 2030, an estimated 15 million tons is expected to be discarded of lithium-ion batteries. So what that means is there's actually going to be even more, imagine like a pit of lithium-ion batteries that can be accessed abroad. So more landfills are going to be filled with lithium-ion batteries, which are ultimately going to create more opportunities for Li-Cycle to pull from those landfills and actually utilize those batteries to create more electric vehicle material by extracting its essential components. So essentially, Tesla expanding is going to create more infrastructure also for Li-Cycle to continue its expansion as well. And like I said, it's kind of like a match made in heaven, ironically, because of the 5-year rollout plan that Li-Cycle currently has that matches with Tesla. Now, Li-Cycle is a much smaller company. So these are things that, Tesla needs to work on as far as scaling up its production capabilities. But yeah, definitely, it'll allow opportunities to create more battery sources.
And also, I also would like to add on to my CEO here, David. Tesla, regarding the legal ramifications of this on the international market, Tesla is actually a company that it's perfectly positioned in the international market. It's the only one of the only companies in the world, if not the only one, that has managed to secure a sole proprietorship in China. No one has ever done that before. Everyone that has gone in, GM, Ford, they had to go 50-50 with the Chinese government. Tesla is 100% the owner of their factories in China, in Europe, and in the USA. This means they hold no boundaries as much as they can expand on the international market. And it even has the greatest ability to do so in China, which is the biggest vehicular market in the world right now, with over 1 billion cars in future demand projected over the next 10 years. So we also have to take into account that recycling batteries is becoming more and more important as time goes by, because 10 years ago is when Tesla started manufacturing their cars in a massive scale, not the first prototype, of course. But as these cars get older, they have to change their batteries. And now when the recycling comes in, it's its strongest, because if we have to buy all the materials, source all the materials internationally, not only for our new cars, but our old cars, and all of these regulations keep exalting the need for these materials, we're running onto a long-term unsustainable supply of these materials, or at least they're not sustainable in a way that's ethical and legally sound, without repercussions to the company, either in PR or in its own value proposition to customers, being clean. That's all Tesla is about. You guys want to be the cleanest company in the world, and you want to push technology forward. And this solution we're proposing, and the legal and the legal frame and the ability of Tesla to do it is currently its biggest advantage over any other corporation in the world. No one can compete with Tesla in batteries and vehicle and electric vehicle production. And if we go this step further, the barriers to entry to the market of someone else polluting or someone else producing non-clean energy is going to be even higher. So we accomplish even a higher goal of being the most ethically and morally correct company, doing the best at a moment in history where we're turning from internal combustion engines to electric vehicles.
Mr. Menendez, one of the things that you were talking about was obviously the ethical and moral obligations. And one thing that my fellow board member Barney brought up is by complying or even acting as an ethical organization, in operating business in such a way that we aren't supporting child labor or we aren't mining and destroying the environment in other countries. By doing that and acting ethically, as some people would put it, are we creating a humanitarian problem in those countries by doing that? And does that expose Tesla in a different way? And if so, what thoughts does Amet have and the group have with respect to how we can perhaps minimize, if not eliminate, the negative humanitarian impact in those countries? Are there suggestions your group would have for Tesla for that?
Yes, of course. Drawing a bit from my economics background, we can be certain that two wrongs don't make a right. By just keep mining from these countries and allowing this Chinese and Democratic Republic of Congo corporations to enslave these childs, we're not promoting any sort of economic development. We're only promoting, we're only fueling that these kids get exploited and that these people keep doing this. If they cannot sell the materials that they mine to someone, they would not mine them. They will have to go other routes. We're just promoting corruption if we keep this in the long run, especially because in the international tariff market, the European Union, for example, taxes heavily on these countries for producing more advanced products. So it's really the hurdle. The biggest hurdle is governmental issues more than company-wise. However, we don't want to address our solution does want to address this issue a bit, because as we saw in Gabby's presentation, our chief legal officer, there's a lot of lawsuits. There has been a lot of lawsuits. Kjolva versus Dutch Roll Company was back 20 years ago, and it was Shell Corporation, the gas manufacturer, exploiting labor in Nigeria. Now we have the same.
Let me interrupt you for just a second, because I think my colleague Jason has a question.
Yeah, I wanted to piggyback on what Monica introduced here, because I subscribe to the thinking that a company is not either ethical or not ethical. It's the people that work for the company. And, in this race for sustainability, the race for a more environmentally conscious company, also comes that race for profitability. And all that said, is it so much, and in Devin's closing, he mentioned something that he said, to come off as, and I think that dovetails nicely into the title of your consultant's presentation of Ruse or reality. Is it enough for us to just present that we are making incremental steps for positive change, or do we truly need to affect all of these changes on a humanitarian play? Is it really just the messaging, the communication that Tesla is working toward best practices, but not necessarily needing to do so, at a potential cost to the company?
Yeah, so first I want to thank you for referencing our title as well. I think it's a must. It's definitely, and I think as a team, and we can all agree on this, it's a must action that Tesla needs to take, especially with the overall international push from the United Nations. Meeting these sustainability development goals changes the ways investors think. It changes the ways corporations think, and it changes the ways that society views these corporations. Tesla needs to act, and saying that you're going in a certain direction and maybe disassociating from certain unethical practices isn't enough, because Tesla is a leader, and Tesla needs to be the company that sets the standard. I mean, as you guys know, you've done a phenomenal job already, but there's a lot of opportunity for public relations, catastrophic public relations events for Tesla if investors and the community realizes that Tesla isn't doing what it's saying it's intending to do, and that is associating with these unethical mining sources and unsustainable practices.
I thought you did really well. The Q&A was terrific. That's really hard because you don't know what we're going to ask you. You don't know what angle we're going to come from. The presentation I thought was terrific. One really small nitpick. One of the slides on legal, Gabriella, take a look at the spelling of heightened. So I think you just have heighted. And that's just going to be a minor distraction. But well done. Monica?
Yes, I thought the presentations from each one of you were very well done. You can tell that you put a lot of time into the presentations, and I very much appreciated that. I also want to commend the group for the scan option on the website. I actually pulled that up and looked at your site. That was great. Very impressive, and all of the information that's in here I think just certainly dovetails well with the presentation and the services that the group was offering. So that was great. It was a great little add-on. So congrats, good job.
Yeah, I thought this was a very well done presentation. I tend to geek out on data points and technology. So your integration of our ability to scan, jump right in, and kind of interact with the presentation is key, especially as every day I have 1 or 2 presentations that I'm in, and we're in a COVID world. Everything's so Zoom focused. We're on our screen. So the ability to interact and still feel like we're part of that was really, really helpful for me. Personally, I found like so much of the data points, they're compelling. And I think that's what compelling is, what's going to potentially drive the thought, drive the inspiration to affect change with any organization that you present to. And I think cohesively, you all worked really well together. I think you all gave each other the proper amount of stage time. You all researched extensively and brought your best strengths to this presentation.